Hello, virtual tabletop gaming live attendees. My name's James. I'm from Nottingham Games, and I'm talking today about how we go about designing tabletop games. Uh, First of all, who is Nottingham Games? We are a small game design studio in Nottingham, in the UK, and we make tabletop games. Generally, people come to us with a brief. They might have some miniatures, or they might have an IP, or they might have an idea for a game, and we will design that to brief for people, for our clients, and help them, realize their ideas. We also work on games for ourselves, and we help people polish and refine their own games. So we have a rules review service. We offer business support, mentoring, all sorts of things like that. We run workshops and courses like this one. We've been doing game design courses for the last couple of years now. We've put about it's probably not far off about 50 people through the course now, several of whom have gone on to use the skills that we teach in making games, and several games have now ended up on Kickstarter as a result. We also organise networking and social events for the games industry in Nottingham. We have actually moved those online since lockdown began, so if you work in or around tabletop games and you'd be interested in joining us for a hangout once every couple of weeks, and joining our Discord server where we talk about various things related to the industry, people seek advice and things, drop us a line. You can find us at needycatgames.com. Also, we do a podcast called Finding Games, which is all about getting into the games industry, and we speak to various people from around different parts of the industry, game designers, artists, people who run events, people who run game stores, and we just find out how they ended up working with games. So that's Needy Cat. Who am I? I'm James. I'm one of the founders of Needy Cat Games. It's myself and Sophie Williams, and also our cat Hilo, who occasionally joins in the fun. I've been a full-time tabletop game designer for about 6 years. The past 3 of that with Needy Cat, and prior to that, 3 and a bit years with Games Workshop, where I worked on quite a few of their games. But I've worked around games in different ways for about the past 18 years, and that was an upsetting thing to work out, let me tell you that much. When I figured out it had been about 18 years, I was upset. But here I am now, and what I really enjoy is using that experience and the connections I've built up over that time to help people who are new to game design or the games industry generally find their feet and make a good start. Here's a little showcase of some of the things I've worked on. As you can see, a lot of the games I've done have had a slant towards miniatures and that sort of thing. It's not the only thing I like, certainly. I'm a massive board games fan, and I've designed a lot of things that don't look like this. Some of those are in the pipeline, will be coming out soon. Some of them are more hobby projects that might see the light of day eventually. Unfortunately, when you're known for a particular type of thing, you tend to get pigeonholed. So I tend to end up getting hired for working on the same sorts of things. But I did actually do a talk last year. You can see Hellboy, the board game, on the left over there, and Devil May Cry at the top. Both of those are licensed games. At last year's Tabletop Gaming Live, I did a talk on turning licensed games, I think specifically Hellboy, turning a license into a board game. So if you'd like to watch that, I'm sure it's still on the YouTube channel, and I'm sure a link can be found somewhere in the description. But anyway, what am I talking about today? That's enough about me. Today I'm talking about how we design tabletop games at Needy Cat. So because we work at quite a high capacity, we work on a lot of things at a time, and we have a pretty speedy workflow, we had to develop a system for designing games efficiently. And what we soon discovered is that that system has applications outside of our specific case in helping people make games and stick with the process. So not just kind of go, I've got an idea for a game, I'll try writing it, and then have that fall apart. Our process breaks that process of things down into several steps, which are achievable. And there are lots of things you can ignore when you're in that process, things that can halt a game. So our process has been really helpful. We turned this into our game design course, and I'm going to go through it in a brief way today and hopefully give you an overview of what we do and how that can help you design games more efficiently yourselves. This is aimed at anyone who wants to design games, who has maybe tried before and not got on so well. Maybe even people who have designed a couple of games already might learn something from this. But certainly, we're not pretending to know all the answers. This is just the thing that we've designed that works for us. Also, I'll talk about why playtesting is really important. It's quite a well-known topic, I think. playtesting is a really important part of game design. Playtesting arguably is game design, and so I'm going to be talking about that and talking about some of the different things we consider when we're playtesting. And I'm going to finish off with some dangerous game design myths. We call these the ruinous myths. These are things which can, again, they're stumbling blocks. They get in the way and prevent you from being good at designing games. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. This is also kind of a condensed version of a couple of things that come from our course Game Design Online, which you can buy through our website, nearlycatgames.com/learn. You can buy it, it's £50. You get a bundle of 6 one-hour seminars. They're recordings of live seminars that I ran with full supporting materials and links to our Discord server, so you can come on, ask us questions, get our feedback on your game. And as it says there, if you use discount code Tabletop Live, that's good till the end of September, and it will get you 20% off the purchase. So that makes it very affordable. £40. Why not have that for 6 hours of stuff? Anyway, that's enough about kind of me and what we're talking about today. Let's actually get on and talk about some stuff. Okay, here we go. So again, first of all, a disclaimer: there is no one true way to create a tabletop game. If anyone tells you they've cracked the one way to make games, they try to sell you that, they're probably selling you snake oil. What we will say is this is our system and it works for us. And we've refined it through running these courses, and we found that this works for a lot of people who have come on and been part of this course. So it works as a starting point. Like any creative endeavour, having some rules and structures in place will give you a great framework to then go away and find your own path. So don't take any of this as the only way to design games. We really recommend you read around the topic, go and do research online, look at other game design tutorials, and you will find lots of things that might agree with things we say or might contradict things we say. The point is to find your own path, but this hopefully will give you one solid, tested process that will help you make games. Normally, I run this course live, either in person or through like a webinar, and I will often pause to ask questions. Obviously, that's a bit more tricky when this is a pre-recorded video, but if you have any questions, there's two things you can do. You can either get the course and join our Discord and we can have some big discussions about things, or just, if you're on Twitter, hit me up at Lagoon83, that's my Twitter handle. You can find me on there, or Needy Cat Games on Facebook. And yeah, ask any questions you got about the course. I'll happily answer or clarify any points. So let's talk about our design process then. I've bigged it up a fair bit now. So here it is. It's 6 key stages. We actually have 9 stages in the full version of this, but this is what really matters. These are the 6 stages that matter. You can see the entire thing on our website, as we've got the link at the bottom there. But the point of this is it breaks the process of designing a game, which is this huge nebulous affair, into several small, manageable, achievable chunks, which become much more realistic for anyone who wants to design a game. Now, we initially designed this as a tool for codifying our process, so that when we have a meeting with a client, say someone has come to us, we're designing a game for them, we can use this process, these terms, to explain whereabouts we are. Because when you're dealing with a client, you want to make sure that they know where you are, they're happy with where you are, and it's difficult if you have to keep explaining, oh, we're at this stage, just after the bit where we've kind of initially worked out some ideas, but we're getting onto this. With this, we have a nice clear-cut system. Conveniently, we then discovered that this, having stages, really works just as a design process generally. It helps us for our scheduling. It helps us from a mental load point of view, knowing, okay, we're currently on test build, we haven't got to worry about any of those things later. And so now we teach this as part of our game design course. Of the 6 stages, 3 of them are what we would consider like the core game design. So that's test build, mechanical draft, full draft. That's the 3 builds of the game, if you like. But we start off, first of all, with a kickoff. Kickoff is a meeting that we have with a client, but also if we're doing a game for ourselves, it's a time when we sit down and we bash out the ideas of what the game will be. The aim of the kickoff is to write a brief for yourself. And that doesn't have to be anything complex. It's just a set of guidelines for what you want the game to be. So is this going to be a miniatures skirmish game for 2+ players, which plays in about 2 hours? Is this a let's say, being really really original? Let's say is it a Euro game about trading resources in the Mediterranean? No one's done it before. You can have that idea for free. Maybe put trains in as well. Another novel concept that no one's thought of. Is it a small card game? Is it a family game? Is it a social game? What is it you're trying to do? Get that written down and put into words. You can absolutely change your mind later. You can say at this point, I want the game to use custom dice. Down the line, you might think, actually, custom dice are quite expensive. I'd like to use normal dice, please. That's fine. You can change what's in your brief. But the key thing is that having a brief gives you a direction to move in. And any changes, any deviations you make from that become conscious, based on reflection and the evidence that you've come up with while designing the game. What you don't want to do is just say, I'm going to make a game. I'm going to make a 2-player game. The more vague you are, the less direction you have, the easier it is to run out of steam, lose direction, lose impetus, and then the game's going to fall apart. Once we've done the kickoff, so we've got our brief, we've established what we're going to do, we go into a period of research and development. So it's more research and development. We might need to rename this stage. We just call it R&D, where basically we go and look at as many things around the subject of the game as we can. So if, for example, you're deciding to go and make a game about trading resources in the Mediterranean, you might go out and play every other game that involves playing, trading resources in the Mediterranean. There's probably only 2 or 3, so it won't take too long. If you're making a miniature skirmish game, go and play as many other miniature skirmish games as you can. But don't just do that, because you don't want to create something that is just a knockoff of what's already out there. So while it's important to play what's already been done, it's also important to cast your net wide and play other games that you think might have elements you could borrow from. So in your miniatures skirmish game, don't just go and play the big ones. Don't just go and play Warhammer, War Machine, Infinity. Go and play other things and play board games. Some of the best pieces of design work I think I've done in miniatures-based board games have introduced elements from non-miniatures-based board games that have not previously been used in miniatures games. Warhammer Quest Silver Tower was a game I did, and the dice mechanic was it borrowed heavily from Dead of Winter, which is a game which has nothing to do with miniatures or skirmish games. The point is that during the research and development phase, it can last as long as you want, and often, in my experience, it kind of begins before the kickoff. So this diagram might be a little bit misleading. It's from the moment you start thinking of the game you want to make, you want to start writing down notes of inspiration, things that you're going to bring into your game. The end goal of the research and development process is to have a set of what we call idea boards, and these are individual, grouped collections of ideas. So we might go and say we're doing let's say a game about gladiators fighting in an arena, because that's a popular thing, right? So what we might do is we might go and play a load of Spartacus, which is a board game about warriors fighting in an arena. Might go and play Gore Chosen, which is a game I did for Games Workshop, which was again about warriors fighting in an arena. We might go and read historical accounts of gladiators fighting in arenas. We might go and watch collections of fight scenes from films, Gladiator and the Spartacus TV series. Think about what are the cool cinematic moments, what are the things that make people think this is a gladiatorial fight in an arena. And then we'll play as many other games as we can and try and think what ideas can we borrow from those to make this different from what's already out there. And each of those things will get a page of ideas. So we might have one page for drafting your fighter, one page for how the combat works, how movement works. And the plan here is not to start testing game mechanics or writing rules. It's just sketching down very quickly some ideas for things that we can try out. And as I say, research and development can be as quick or as long-winded as you want it to be. Because what you want to do really is get onto the next stage, which is the test build. You want to start actually putting your game on the table and trying it out as quickly as possible. The more time you spend doing research and development, the more thorough you'll be able to be with your approach to making that test build. But find your own path here. I'll talk in a bit more detail about the test build, mechanical draft, and full draft in a moment. I'm going to go into those in quite a bit of detail. But in short, that is the process of actually designing the game. After that, the final stage of our process is handover and amends, where if we're working for a client, we will hand the game over. If we're working on a game for ourselves, we'll hand it over to a graphic designer or an editor, or people who can take our written game manuscript and turn it into something that is a product. And also any amends, so dealing with little changes to the game that come as a result of editing or layout or whatever else. So that, in a nutshell, is our process. Obviously, I've left out the key middle bit there. I'll come on to that in a second. But as you can see, what this does is this simplifies the thought process, and as I said earlier, it codifies it so that you know what sort of things to think about at each stage. So what does that central chunk look like then? So the test build is the first place we get to here. So the point of a test build is to get the ideas off your idea boards. So you got them out of your head onto your idea boards during R&D, and now you take them from the idea boards and put them onto the table. This is your first rough prototype, and rough really is the key word. You don't want to spend any time whatsoever on the look of your game. At this point, you want to be grabbing components from other games, or maybe you'll build up a collection of spare components, interesting things. Use coins, use scraps of paper, quick sketches. If you need anything to physically represent something, just draw it very quickly. Very importantly, you don't have a rule book at all at this point. So many new designers get caught up on the idea of writing the rules for their game as though that were game design, and we'll come on to that in a little bit. But vitally, all you need here is a few scribbled notes maybe for yourself. Oh, the game works roughly like this. What you want to do is you want to work towards having a 10-minute slice of gameplay. And that might be a single round of play or a couple of turns or something like that. Just start playing around, getting to the point where you can feel there's some fun things there. You're looking to see if there's a solid core concept to your game. Is the core concept interesting? Is there fun to be found here? That doesn't mean is it fun in its current state, because it probably won't be, because it'll be really rough, it'll be really rushed, and there's a fair chance that it won't necessarily function. It might be broken horribly, but is there the sense that there's fun here? And the more games you design, the quicker you'll get to that stage of knowing whether something is a solid core concept, whether it's fun. The main thing to look out for here is this thing a horrible idea? Should I just give up now? Does this not work at all? And I've had several games like that where I've got to the test build stage and gone, oh, no, I hadn't considered there's something that once you put it on the table just doesn't work. This would probably work as an app game, but doesn't work as a board game or whatever. Scrap it and move on. The joy is, at this point, you've not done a huge amount of work. You're not months in here. The picture you can see there is actually from one of the first times we ran this course in person, back when running things in person was an option. And what you can see is the afternoon session, part of our first full day session. So we would do a full day where we talk about theory and things in the morning, then practical stuff in the afternoon. And that in the morning of the first session, we talked a lot about overcoming barriers and getting a game onto the table. So we talked about the brief, the R&D, and making a test build. And then we gave everyone a challenge to make a game in about half an hour and just make a test build. Come up with some ideas, come up with some notes, and just here's a bunch of components. We gave every table a box of components, go make a game. And it is astonishing how quickly you can get to that stage of actually having something playable. This game here was to do with World War II market gardening or something. I think it was people dig for victory, that whole kind of thing. And as you can see, it's very rough. It's very straightforward. It's just a few sheets of paper. The most work of any component was in the centre, which was a bag with the word pig written on it, because you could feed your vegetable scraps to the village pig, and I forget exactly what happened. But it was an interesting game. It was an interesting idea. They just looked at the components they had available and thought, what can we do with this? And this is what came out of it. And I think a really important skill in learning to get good at designing games is not worrying about making something good initially. Just make something and it will become good. You will hone it, or you'll realise it can't be good and you'll move on to something else. I speak to too many people who say, I've been working on this game idea for 17 years and maybe one day it'll be good. In that time, you could have produced 50 naff games, but learnt something from the process of each one of those. So next up, we have the mechanical draft. Once your test build starts firming up and you feel, over the process of it could be a day, it could be a week, it could be a month. Over that time, you will start feeling that your game is taking shape and you start to get a feel for what the game is. You move on to what we call the mechanical draft. And this is your first functional prototype. By functional, what I mean is you've got enough stuff there to play a basic game from start to finish. In the test build, you just had a little slice of like one round of play. But here you're looking at start, middle, end. What is the plot arc, if you will, of playing your game? What's the emotional arc that the players go through? And here is the first time that you will start writing rules down. Again, don't start with rules, start with gameplay and write your rules down later. The rulebook needs to codify the game, i.e. it needs to write down all of the rules of your game, probably in very simple bullet point note form. This is mainly for your benefit as the designer. This is not a thing that is designed to teach the game to other people. You might start doing some simple graphic design. I mean, nothing complex. You're just starting to look at the function of the graphic design. So you're looking at things that show players what things do. In the image you can see there to the right, actually, this is Robot Fight Club, which is a game we took to Kickstarter early this year, just as lockdown was happening. It'll be coming back to Kickstarter at some point later when people are, well, now we probably could bring it back in the near future, actually. Now people have got used to the idea of staying at home and not hoarding things and spending money on toilet roll instead. But yeah, basically we launched a game on Kickstarter this year, and we're going to make some changes to it and bring it back later. But what you can see here is a mechanical draft. It's not been very cleverly designed. There is a very basic board with some very basic board elements. There's some little cardboard standees I made. Loads of card sleeves with very basic looking cards in, and a few bits of graphics for usable iconography, which has a clear in-game impact. And actually, this wasn't even the first mechanical draft. The mechanical draft looked a lot rougher than this initially. This was after some development. The point is, though, during this stage, you're looking to codify your game and then test it to refine the core engine. You're not worrying about writing a load of different scenarios or variant rules or different player powers or whatever. You're just looking at the core experience of the game. Start, middle, end. Does the core engine work? When you test this, because you will start at this point pushing it out to your playtesters, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, are your playtesters invested and interested? You want to watch their body language. Are they, sitting back waiting for it to be over, or are they engaged watching what's happening? Are they having to make interesting decisions? Interesting decisions are absolutely key to good gameplay, and at this stage you will start to see those emerge, hopefully. If not, you need to consider either changing something or going back completely and rethinking your game. And yeah, also here you're looking for any glaringly huge broken bits, any grey areas or ambiguities in the rules that are very exploitable. You're not worrying about balance, though. Balance is not a thing you're thinking of here. You're just thinking of, are there any bits that break the game? So once the mechanical draft is done, you've got a polished, working, well-tested, well-refined version of your game, which it's probably not very deep. There might only be, so in Robot Fight Club, where you're fighting all different robots, you might only have 2 robots, and you're just fighting the same 2 robots against each other because you're just testing how the mechanics work. Once that's all done, you then move on to what we call the final draft, which is where you start. This is like the last stage of prototyping. This is where you're trying to create the one-to-one mock-up of your final game. So for a start, the big difference here is that you completely write your rulebook. You'll go back and you'll rewrite it from scratch, and you're writing it now as a teaching manual as much as a list of rules. And that's a whole skill in itself. We cover. We actually have two of the 6 seminars in our game design course are about writing rules. So this is a huge thing. But the point is that you're creating a complete written rulebook that is intended to teach the game and be an approachable document. You'll have diagrams, whatever else. You might not actually create the diagrams, you might just put placeholders in, but you are accounting for diagrams, illustrations, tables, anything else. Everything that you want to be in the final game now comes into the prototype. So all the different variant rules, different factions, all the different maps you want to use, whatever it might be, that all comes in here. You want to make it as close as possible to the final game, because now you're going to start testing the refined version. You're going to start giving people your game, and you're not going to teach them anymore. During Mechanical Draft, you were teaching them the game and watching how they reacted. In this one, you're just going to let them do it, and you're going to watch how they react and see how your game will be perceived in the wild. The key point is, you're looking for, at this point, is the game easy to learn? Is everything clear? Is it polished? Have you missed anything? Generally, you'll find one thing that makes you curse your life because you've missed something really obvious that you should have fixed ages ago. But what you'll see is that, if I show you here, that the things you have to worry about expand as you go. So during the test build, you're not worrying about setup rules, objectives, the structure of your rulebook, examples, diagrams, color text. You don't want to worry about color text being like a descriptive narrative text. You're not worrying about anything that teaches the game. The test build is just the core game rules scribbled down, and you're going to play that game and keep on refining it. We often talk about the test build as like the free-form jazz part of game design. You're just changing and improvising and changing things up really quickly. Mechanical Draft, you're starting to build your rulebook with the core rules, setup, instructions, objectives. You're thinking about rulebook structure, about the order things that are presented in. You might include some simple examples and diagrams if they're really necessary to make your rules make sense. But it's not until the full draft that all of those things come in. So the complexity gradually increases. And the joy of that is when you're working on your test build, you haven't got to worry about how the game is set up, how you win. You're not worrying about having to teach the game. And that, we call these things the ignorables. They are things that you don't have to worry about, and they massively reduce the mental load on you as a designer. They reduce your need to think of a million things at once. It really boils it down. Just to give you a couple of examples of rules writing at the different stages, actually. I've got a couple of examples here from Hellboy the board game. I dug out some very early stuff from the test build. So this is a scribbled sheet of notes that I did. This wasn't even early test build. This was late test build when I was taking this in to show Mantic Games, who then published the game. And I had just scribbled this down. And this is like as much as you ever want to get to with the test build. So there's a mission clock that goes 1 to 12. Events happen at 3, 6, and 9. Anyone who knows Hellboy the board game will know this is no longer the case. This is early draft stuff. The round, you have like a refresh, then enemies go, then agents go, then doom happens. And there's some very simple rules about enemy AI with some bullet points there. In the mechanical draft, that stuff about the round got fleshed out quite a bit. But as you can see, it's still very sort of bullet pointy, and feel free to pause the video and read this in detail if you'd like to. And if you've got a copy of the Hellboy board game, feel free to pull out the rules for it and compare. You'll see some interesting changes. But in the mechanical draft, it is much more, the rules are laid out, but it's not trying to teach the game. As opposed to the full draft, which if I just flick back and forth between them, you see there's a lot more in the way of words in the full draft, because now it's explaining things in detail. It says here, a game is split into a cycle of rounds, each made up of 6 phases, and so on. These always happen in a fixed order. It's trying to cover off every eventuality so that new players have an easy time of learning how it is without having to make assumptions. So yeah, that's our process in a nutshell. The point of it is it helps you focus on what's important at each stage. I love this picture. It's there's the saying, how do you eat an elephant? You start at the trunk and work backwards, or you do it one bite at a time. Even a gargantuan task like designing a game becomes a lot easier when you boil it down to its core components and do them one at a time. So yeah, our process, make sure you don't get ahead of yourself, and gives you a series of achievable goals. Each step of our process has a point at the end which says you are done with this process when, well, this stage of the process when. And there's often a bit of a wibbly grey area because, you know, you can tinker endlessly. But, again, it gives you things that you can achieve and then know it's time to move on from. So that is our process. I've talked about that for long enough now. So yeah, let's talk about playtesting. Playtesting is something that is utterly vital to game design. It is game design. And I kind of glossed over it in the previous section because I wanted to talk about it in more detail here. First up, what is playtesting? Playtesting is the act of playing some or all of a game with the intention of improving the design. That's a sentence that I've refined and worked at quite a lot because it's quite specifically worded. So it's the act of playing some or all of a game. You don't need to finish a game while playtesting. You play until you're either not learning anything new, or you've got enough information that you know you're going to make enough changes that it invalidates the rest of what you're doing. A key skill in getting good at playtesting is knowing when to say, let's call it there. I'm going to go and do some more development on this. Or let's call it there. We're not learning anything new. Or let's call it there. Let's restart and play it differently and see what happens. So playing some or all of a game with the intention of improving the design. It's really important that playtesting is not just playing a game. You're playing it with the intention of improving the design. That means that if you as a designer are running the playtest, you're keeping notes, you're being diligent in watching how your players are reacting. They're going to use that information to make the game better. As a playtester, it means that, again, you're keeping notes and you're thinking of the game, not just in terms of do I want to win right now, but you're thinking about the experience you're having. You're actively engaging with the experience of the game in a way that you can give feedback on to the designer later. Playtesting is the best, if not only, way of finding out if a game works. You can theorise a game until the cows come home. You can write a rulebook, make it beautiful, fill it with lovely rules and examples and things, but until it hits the table, you're not going to know if the game actually works. As it says at the bottom there, playtesting is game design. I'm not sure there's much of a distinction between the two, frankly. I think there's playtesting and there's rules writing, really. As I've already sort of hinted, playtesting is iterative. What I mean by that is that it's a process which it builds on itself and you go through the same kind of steps again and again and again. So you design part of the game. You might design the entire game, you might design one little bit, whatever the case, but you test that part, whether that's a little part or a big part. You see what works and what doesn't work. You make notes and you make changes as a result of those notes. And you keep testing and making changes until it stabilizes, by which I mean you play it and you think, no, actually that's fine as it is, that doesn't need to change anymore. That's when it's stable. And then you repeat that with a different part of the game. Now, the amount of iteration and the amount of changes you make will vary depending on whereabouts you are in the process. In the test build stage, you'll probably make changes mid-gameplay because something doesn't work. You'll take your component, cross out a 2 and put a 4 on it. You might just actually say, oh, we don't need dice, put the dice away. You might say, oh, we need dice, bring dice in. The changes you make early on will be much, much, much greater than the changes you make later on. Think of it as, doing a marble sculpture. You have different tools for different parts of the job. Or even, let's say, an ice sculpture, because that's a cooler image. With an ice sculpture, you might start off with a large chainsaw to block out the rough shape of the thing you're doing, and then you will move on to progressively smaller tools to make smaller changes as you move on. There's no point initially trying to massively refine the face if you haven't done the shape of the entire body. So yeah, playtesting is iterative, and playtesting can go on forever because it's an iterative process. The more you do it, the better your game will get. That's without question. But there is the law of diminishing returns in effect, by which I mean that taking your game from 95% perfect to 96% perfect, assuming that perfect were a thing that could happen, that little 1% when you're already up here might take just as long as going from 50% to 90%. So early on, testing will make big sweeping changes that will make your game much, much better. When you're into the full draft and you're making very, very tiny tweaks, you might be making one change every 5 games. You can tinker at that point utterly endlessly. but the question is, how much better is your game really going to be as a result? Finishing a project and moving on to something new and exciting is its own reward. Don't be the sort of designer that does one thing and sits on it for years, tinkering and slaving away and changing a few little things and making it perfect. Because I think that perfect is the enemy of done, I think is the expression. You can tinker forever, but just getting a game done and starting something else is better. You will learn more. If you're looking to be a good game designer, you will learn more by finishing 10 projects rather than having them like 80% perfect each, again, if perfect were a thing, than having one project that is polished to utter perfection. And broadly, we use three different types of playtesting. So as I was saying, like, you have your chainsaws and you have your, brushes, whatever it is that people use in the final stages of an ice sculpture. We have different types of testing that we use. Some of them are quite broad, some of them are quite finessed. So solo testing is when you as the designer, you test the game by yourself. Maybe you might bring in one other person or something, but the game is very much in your head mostly, and you can therefore make big, sweeping changes without much of a hassle. Guided testing it takes it one step removed. So you're still involved. You're running a group of playtesters through the process of playing the game. You are on hand if they have any rules questions, if they're not sure about something, you're answering their questions. There might be like a written rule book for them to refer to, but you're very much leading the rules thing. So at that point, it's more difficult to make huge changes because any change you make, you have to explain to a group of people, and you might confuse them. But you are still there, so there's a safety net. The third type we use is blind testing, which is where you give the game to a group of playtesters and you walk away. And some designers will record that session, or they might watch from the corner of the room in a slightly creepy fashion. That's usually what I do, and I have to stop myself butting in and answering questions. But blind testing is where you are no longer part of the process. You're just observing. And at that point, you can't make changes mid-test. You have to make changes afterwards. And as such, you will generally gather lots of feedback and then consider your changes very carefully. Conveniently, though, those three types of testing, it's almost like we planned this out, those three types of testing line up quite nicely with the three core stages of game design that we do. So solo testing is great at the test build stage because you can just go mad. You can make big changes, do cool experiments, you can try different things out. You can have a great time. Try one thing, it doesn't work, scrap it, go back to your idea board, find a different idea, move that in instead, try that out. And you can do 10 variants of the game in the space of half an hour. You can have a great time. Also because you're not worrying about making components, you're just scribbling on bits of paper. It doesn't matter if you suddenly decide, oh, actually we need a scoreboard, or oh, actually the scoreboard was no good, let's get rid of that, let's have a map instead. Guided testing then is kind of most aligned to the mechanical draft stage, because at that point you're not worrying about the written rules. The mechanical draft, the rule book you've written, is for your benefit mostly. It codifies the rules. It's not trying to teach the game. So you're able to translate between those written rules and the gameplay experience. Blind testing then is what we use for the full draft, because you've now got a written rule book and you want to see how that performs. You're testing the written rules. Blind testing is the most granular, most honest feedback, as it says there, but it will require a finished game. Because what I mean by honest is it's the one which best reflects the finished game experience that you've intended, hopefully. But you can't get there until the very end of the process because you have to do all that other work first. Of course, this is not absolute. You can still solo test your test build. I wouldn't recommend blind testing your test build. That's probably a bit crazy. But you can do a lot of stuff around this. There are grey areas, there are crossovers and exceptions. This is just a very general guide. And that in a nutshell really is playtesting. Again, on our course we go into a lot more detail on techniques and tricks for playtesting, but this is just a general overview for now. Okay, so finally, let's talk about the 3 ruinous game design myths. It's quite a fancy title. What these basically are, these are common traps that a designer needs to avoid. They're things which we have come up with based off our own experience. These are all things that we've dealt with, that we've seen other people deal with, that we often see new designers stumble over when they come to us looking for help. the important thing is these are things which prevent people making good games. It's a very overblown name, the Ruinous Myths, but I think it helps them stick in your head and hopefully blasts through the mental barriers that they create. Because they, as I said here, they will hold you back. If you can recognise these myths and recognise them in your own behaviour, then your design practices will really, really improve. So yeah, the first one, this one hurts sometimes. The first myth is that ideas are inherently valuable. We often get emails or messages or phone calls or conversations in person from friends, from people saying, I've got a great idea for a game. Would you like to design it? And we'll split the profits. As you can probably imagine, we've never said yes to one of those because an idea by itself doesn't really mean anything. Ideas are never in short supply. Every designer, if you want to design games, you will have half a dozen ideas bubbling in your head at any one time. It's just part of the process. An idea doesn't mean anything until you take it through this process. If you imagine, going back just very briefly to our game design process, an idea for a concept for a game is like, it's where kickoff starts. It's the first thing you do. The work is everything else on that list. So saying I've got an idea, it's not a thing that necessarily inherently has any value. But you have to then take that notion and use it to criticize your own work. You need to remember that an idea is no good until you put it into practice. That's why we say don't write loads of rules down first, play the game and then write the rules afterwards, because it's much easier to theorize an idea while writing rules than it is to theorize an idea and not try it while you're just trying games on the table. One of the worst traps you can fall into is getting a good idea. I've got this great idea and I really want to get this into the game because I think it's really cool and really clever. And you'll bend over backwards. You will ruin your game trying to make this one idea work if it's not working. And we often refer to murdering your darlings. When we do rules review for people, I will keep an eye out for things that they've clearly put in because they think they're cool. And they stand out. They absolutely stand out. One key warning is when a designer says, here's my rules, please look through them, but this particular thing I love, please keep that in. And I won't lie, that generally means it's going to come out because, or at least we'll advise for it to come out, because it's usually a thing that has been put in to the detriment of the rest of the game. This applies to every level. So this could be ideas for games, core concept for a game. It could be an idea for a mechanic. It could be an idea for a tweak for something I think it could be better this way. If you can get past the idea of ideas having inherent value, you will find yourself becoming a much better game designer very quickly. And that's why it's Ruinous Myth number 1. Number 2, I think I've laboured this point already a few times, but it's the fact that designing games and writing rules are the same thing. Some people think that being a game designer and being a rules writer are the same thing. They're not. They are two completely separate skill sets. And it is very easy to be great at one. I say easy, it's possible to be great at one and terrible at the other. I personally consider myself a much better game designer than a rules writer. I'm getting better at being a rules writer, but it's a skill I'm having to work on developing specifically. So remember, don't mix them up. Design your game first and then write your rules. And then hopefully you'll not fall into this trap. It sounds really obvious because I've been talking about it so much so far, but so many people fall into that trap, and that is why it is a ruinous myth. The third one, and this one's massive, is that people want to steal your game. I see so many people who are afraid to share their game design, their idea, whatever it might be, online with other designers or in designer groups, because they think that other designers will steal it and do it first. So first up, chances are that, because as we said, ideas are inherently worthless, if you've got a concept, any designers you show it to will probably already have a million other ideas of their own. And even if they do borrow some of your ideas, there is a fair chance they'll develop them in a whole new direction. If you think, because playtesting is iterative and game design is playtesting, every designer will take could take the same idea, develop it, and it will end up in a dozen different places. One of the exercises I'm really keen to run at some point in one of these events is I would like to give every designer a copy of Snakes and Ladders and say, go away, playtest that and iterate it for an hour. And then we'll come back and see what everyone's done. One person will have replaced rolling and moving with a hand of cards. One person will have changed the distribution of snakes and ladders. Someone else will have added a third element that isn't a snake or a ladder, that does something else, makes you teleport maybe. The point is that development means that games deviate from their starting point. So even if someone does take your idea, it will meander massively. And let's face it, probably your idea, if we're being honest, probably started as a cool idea that was based off something else that already exists, because that's how most game designers come about. I really like Settlers of Catan, but I wish there was more of a combat element to it. So I'm going to make a game which is Settlers of Catan plus combat. And you won't be the first person to have thought of that. What you will be able to do is develop it in a cool, unique way, hopefully, that will make it stand out as your game. Most importantly, what you will get from showing your game to other designers and other people generally is you will get loads of input, loads of criticism, and loads of feedback. And that will help your game get so much better. And that massively, massively outweighs the risk of like idea theft. Now, there are a few things, a few little caveats. If you're designing a game which is, I don't know, based off a particular IP, and you're worried someone else might grab that IP first, yeah, maybe be a bit cagey. But generally, when it comes to like design to your game mechanics, your game itself, do not worry about putting it up in front of other people. You will learn so much by doing that. It's just, again, that's why this is a ruinous myth, because we see so many people missing out on that awesome opportunity for feedback simply because they're scared of someone else taking their idea. And honestly, anyone who's looking to kind of pirate a game and steal a game and an idea, there are plenty of games out there for them to do that with. And they'll probably go for one of the ones that's a big popular one that's already tried and tested. And also, if they want to develop your idea and do it first, well, you've got a head start, surely. You've already tried out loads of things. So do not have the fear of sharing your game ideas. And on that note, it's over. That's the end of this seminar. So thank you very much for listening. Good luck with your designs. I'm hoping that people will take some of the information here and be inspired to go and try their own things and make their own games. As I say, if you enjoyed this, the way I deliver it and the content of this seminar, we have a full 6-part course, which is just more of me talking. Literally more of me. I've had a significant diet since then. I've also got rid of my massive beard. But yeah, basically you can go and watch me talking for 6 hours and hopefully learn a lot more detail about this process. And again, if you use Tabletop Live as a discount code before the start of October, you'll get 20% off. So hooray. If you've enjoyed this, tell people. Hashtag NeedyCat Game Design is a thing we often ask people to use. So there's some fun things on there for people that have been on our course. And you can find out more about the course and things we do at needycatgames.com/learn. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of Virtual Tabletop Live. And hopefully I'll see you in person next year.